This conspiracy theory was called Project Bluebeam, and it was written about by Serge Monast. Who was Serge Monast? Serge Monast was a journalist, a poet, and an essayist, and he was an active member of the Social Credit Party of Canada. He was a Canadian. And in the 1990s, he started writing on a theme regarding a new world order. He said that he received documents pertaining to NASA. And in 1994, he published what was called Project Bluebeam, NASA, in which he detailed his claim that NASA, with the help of the United Nations, was attempting to implement a new age religion with the Antichrist as its head and start a new world order. Now that sounds really far-fetched today. Imagine how far-fetched it sounded in 1994. Right, I mean, this is like in 1994, we believed everything that the government said to us. So this to me, that this guy came out in 1994 and said, nope, there is a Project Bluebeam taking place. NASA is involved with the help of the United Nations. I would have thought this man was crazy if I was old enough to consider this. I would have thought he was out of his mind. So what's interesting about this, though, is that he publishes that book in 1994. And then the following years, in 1995 and in 1996, he starts saying that he's being hunted by the police and the authorities for his involvement in networks of prohibited information. Now, that also sounds crazy. Oh, they're after me now because I published Project Bluebeam. He sounds like a total nut job. That sounds insane. Except for the fact that the state then took his children in September of 1996, claiming that his children being homeschooled was just a bad thing and that they weren't receiving the education that they deserved. They made his children wards of the state. They took his children so that they would receive a public education. So that's odd. Why would you take children because they're being homeschooled and make them wards of the state so that they can receive a public education? Well, it's going to get a little odder. He then died of a heart attack in his home in December of 1996 at the age of 51, just one day after being arrested and spending a night in jail. So they arrested him, something pertaining to his children not being in school, and then a day later he died. So obviously you can see that a ton of conspiracy theories regarding his death existed at that time. How bizarre. A guy says he's going to die, that he's being chased by the state. The state then takes his children to help him get a better public education, and then he ends up dead a day after being arrested and spending a night in jail. That's weird. It's weird enough for people to then start listening to maybe some things that he was saying. And I'm going to take you through Project Bluebeam because I think, as I said, that it is insane. It's totally insane, but we will all be better for having heard it. So Serge Monast said that step one of Project Bluebeam was going to involve the manufacturing of artificially created earthquakes in strategic locations around the world. Again, to make it clear, he is stating in 1994 that the governments were in possession of technology that was going to be able to make this happen. Can the government cause earthquakes? I don't really know about that. Again, I'm just telling you what he said. These earthquakes, according to him, were going to unearth ancient artifacts, indicating that the religious doctrines of all nations have been misunderstood for centuries, thus discrediting all religions. The second step, he says, was going to involve a giant show from space. Essentially, they were going to use three-dimensional optical holograms that were going to project holographic images to beam across the sky, and that these images were going to include projections of Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, and it was all going to merge into one. Essentially, they were going to be able to accomplish this by using space-based satellites, and it was going to make the entire sky transform into a massive movie screen. Do they have the technology to do that at NASA? I don't know. NASA really is just sort of a black budget, in my opinion. I have no idea what NASA does. I don't know why they're getting trillions and trillions of taxpayer dollars. I don't know what NASA does. Call me an idiot, but they have an incredible budget for seemingly nothing, in my opinion. The third step is even more far-fetched. He says that this is going to involve artificial intelligence. Again, I just like to state this over and over again. He was saying this in 1994. Artificial intelligence that was going to be able to use mind control to reach people inside of their minds. And this was going to involve rays from satellites that are being fed memories from our computers that have stored massive data about every single human being on Earth. And finally, the fourth step of Project Bluebeam was going to use various technologies in order to convince people that alien invasions were taking place, alien invasions, and even the rapture itself, thus making it easier for governments and the powers that be to take control of a fear-addled population. The NASA Bluebeam project is the prime directive for the New World Order's absolute control over the populations of the entire Earth. But I will say that I'm not buying any of this UFO stuff. I do believe that it is ever so intentional that our government is trying to lead us to believe that something big and scary is happening, because if we've learned anything from the exercise of COVID, it is that when people are fearful, they will give up all of their powers, all of them. Please mask my children. Please tell my neighbors and me to stay at home. Please let us call the police if we see somebody not keeping their 6-foot distance. I've always said COVID was a test. It really, to me, seemed like a global examination to see whether or not you could say things that were clearly insane, that defied common sense, that should have defied the logic of any human being, and to see if people would still listen. I always thought it was an exercise in human subjugation, and an exercise that we failed. We failed. People became crazy. People became insane.